The dawn in San Lazaro de la Cruz snows between the mountain's peaks, dyeing the entire sky yellow. The morning light gently penetrates the thin fog, dancing around the old trees. The singing of a rooster signals a new day, but this morning Don Silverio Gutierrez sensed something different. It was not pain, but an unusual silence, a silence that did not come from the wind. In the small kitchen built of mud and wood, the smell of hot coffee spread, mixing with the space like relaxing music. Silverio was sitting in a hammock, slowly stirring a cup of coffee with just a wooden spoon, and his eyes stopped from time to time in a corner of the room. Almeda, his 8-year-old niece, was still asleep. There was a slight smile on her lips, perhaps dreaming of her favorite flowers. Her soft brown hair hung over her face like a thin curtain that protected her quiet sleep. Silverio looked at his niece calmly, fearing that even the slightest movement could destroy this moment of peace. The morning mass at 10 is always a sacred family ritual. Every Sunday, his wife Mercedes and his daughter Rocio wear embroidered flowers dresses and walk hand in hand to the small church in town. But this morning, something deep in his chest told him that Almeda should not go. His voice was hoarse and deep. "Today, please stay with me, Almeda. We will plant more flowers in the garden. The flowers are as dry as your feelings." The girl rubbed her eyes, whispered softly, and then joined her hands in prayer. "We can pray right here, Lord. God still hears from my little field of flowers." Almeda looked hesitantly through the window, as if looking for her mother's silhouette, but in the end she felt it slightly with an obedient smile. At that moment, I did not know that it was that small decision that saved my life. In 2 hours, all of Silverio's life would collapse like the dome of a cathedral. The rain fell lightly, so gently that it was almost beautiful. The bells of the church of Santa Cruz rang, each of them long resonating over the fields, like an ancient hymn that resonates in the past. Silverio looked up at the gray sky, with a feeling of asphyxiation rising from his chest. He bent down, carefully cultivating the earth to plant small sunflowers next to Almeda. When the first thunder broke through the sky, the girl jumped over and her eyes opened at the same time out of panic. It seems that today the sky is angry. Silverio smiled gently, trying to reassure the girl. Almeda clasped her hand, but then bent to help him continue planting flowers. 20 minutes later, everything changed. Suddenly the bells of the church rang. Then came the shouts. Many shouts. The dog barks madly. Silverio's heart beat loudly and erratically, as if an invisible hand squeezed hard. He turned to the town and saw a thin column of black smoke rising to the sky. Then someone came running. Father Jacobo. His tunic was torn, his face covered in blood, and his breathing was irregular, as if he had just returned from hell. Silverio, the church, the ceiling has collapsed, Mercedes, Rocio. Everything around him suddenly remained silent. Silverio dropped a handful of earth he had in his hand. He was paralyzed for a second and then ran away. He did not feel the pieces of stone sticking to his knees. He did not feel the blood leaking through his skin. There was only fear, terror that swallowed every step. The square in front of the church was a sea of people screaming and crying. Moans and prayers mixed with a strong smell of burnt wood and wet earth. And then he saw it. Corpses. Mercedes' legs peeked through the rubble. The embroidered handkerchief that Rocio always wore now dyed red with blood. Silverio knelt with his face buried in the mud, screaming under the fierce rain. "No, God, please take me to them. They are so good. They love you." But the sky did not respond. It only rains. Every day is more intense. Almeda was carried by a neighbor. She ran to hug her grandfather from behind. Silverio squeezed her as if it were the last thing left in the world. That day he lost everything, except the girl. The funeral took place in a silence of mourning. The neighbors carried 2 dark with coffins on their shoulders, with their eyes full of sadness. They took them to a field on a small hill, a resting place for the ancestors of San Lazaro. Mercedes and Rocio, mother and daughter, wife and daughter. Now they sleep together in peace, under the land that they once cultivated and for which they walked every day. Silverio stood still, but inside he was made into hundreds of pieces. His hand squeezed Almeda tightly. The girl did not cry, did not say a word. The eyes simply looked forward, as if the world had lost all its color. When the first shovels threw dirt on the coffin, Almeda suddenly let go of her grandfather's hand and ran towards him. The girl knelt down and used her small hands to try to remove the dirt. "No, Mom. Grandma, do not go. Wait for me." Silverio ran towards her and hugged her tightly from behind. She fought and cried like a person who sinks under the ocean, desperately clinging to the fragile promise. "They promised me. They said they would never leave me." Time stopped. The birds stopped singing. The wind no longer blows. In the following days, Almeda no longer spoke. The girl did not smile, did not cry, and did not eat, simply sitting quietly by the window, holding tightly her mother's wrist, looking at the horizon in the distance. Silverio tried. He told stories. He sings. He makes cakes. "Look, Almeda, what did you do today?" But there was no answer, until one morning, when little by little all hope was fading. Silverio left the small house. He knelt in front of the family's old stone altar in the courtyard. For the first time since the day the tragedy occurred, he raised his eyes to the sky and prayed. Silverio knelt down, holding the cold earth with his hands. "Why, God? Why did you leave me?" he sobbed. Each question crumbled in the midst of despair. Why not take your son instead of them? Why not leave behind the purest flower you have? Then he collapsed on the ground, his whole body trembling, his tears mixed with the mud, crying until he was exhausted and fell asleep right in the middle of the ants and the dust of the road. When Silverio woke up, it was already dark. The cold wind of the night blew through his silvery hair, but not as cold as the scene before his eyes. Almeda was still sitting next to the window. Her small shoulders trembled. The burial took place under an uncolored sky. 2 rustic wooden coffins, covered with wild flowers, were placed side by side in the small cemetery of the city. Silverio no longer cries. His tears had dried. He stayed there, looking at the ground that was slowly filling up, as if something inside him was also being buried. The following days, he silently did what had to be done. He gets up every morning, cooks gachas, and feeds Almeda. He tried to smile. He tried to talk to the flowers as if they were people. But Almeda is no longer the same. And then he himself began to change. Silverio sleeps too much. Then he stopped eating. His eyes lost their light. Until one night, his body fell into desperate convulsions. Silverio carried Almeda in his arms and ran down the street like a madman. Someone could call an ambulance. They took the girl to a hospital in the city, 20 kilometers away. The doctors ran everywhere, testing everything. No fever, no infection, no wound. Then Dr. Bullen Ortega, with a severe look and a firm voice, said what no one wanted to hear. This is a rare case. It could be unique. Silverio held his breath. We call it hypersomnia syndrome. The body sleeps, but the mind seems to have fled. We don't know why it happened. We don't know when, or if it will ever wake up. Silverio squeezed Almeda's little hand. The hand was now cold, connected to cables and machines that emitted whistles. You'll come back, right? He whispered, his voice hoarse. He will be here, every day, until he returns. And at that moment a promise was born. A promise that will move mountains. Don Silverio's house was silent. The windows are closed. Unsold corn bags rot in the corner of the house. The smell of morning still persists on the wall. But he didn't come back. For weeks he slept in a hard chair in a hospital. Next to Almeda, eyes sunken in red. His beard turned gray, stained with dirt and sadness. Only when a bank employee arrived with a wrinkled envelope, the tragedy occurred again. Mr. Silverio Gutierrez, if you don't pay the debt, the bank will seize the property within 48 hours. Silverio did not respond. He simply looked at the ground, where everything was against him. Unharvested crops, unsold corn bags, the growing hospital bills. 2 days later, he returned home to look for some things. The old house remained the same as the last time he left. The damaged tractor remained silent. The hens roam around looking for food, and the Mercedes dress still hangs behind the door. He slowly raised his hand and touched the fabric. Forgive me, my love. I don't know how to protect what we built. He took a set of clothes, an old Bible, a bottle of water, and then he left forever. The land that he used to cultivate with his own hands, the land that bore the name of his parents, now belonged to Bank. But what he was most afraid of losing was still in the hospital, still sleeping and waiting. Don Fulgencio Morales approached him. "I can help you," he said. Then he threw Silverio into a corner of the barn at the end of the farm. Strong smell of fertilizer. The rats run through the rotten wood walls. You can sleep here, but remember, if you want to stay, you have to work. Silverio did not hesitate. "Yes, where are you going to go every morning?" "Go to the hospital, visiting my niece." Don Fulgencio laughed mockingly. "Old man, are you crazy? That girl won't wake up. You are wasting time." But Silverio did not object. He simply bowed his head and started working in silence. From the first hour of the morning, he cleans the manure, sweeps the dirty floors, and rubs the dining rooms with a brush without a handle. And then every day, he walked 20 kilometers to the hospital, under the scorching sun or between the torrential rain. Silverio walked. Each step is a prayer. "Today I come to ask you one thing. If you listen to me, the nurses got used to him. Don Silverio, room 417, the same as always. Every day, he arrives around 4 in the afternoon. His feet are swollen, his shirt soaked in sweat. His body was exhausted, but his eyes remained firm. He always carried something with him, a wildflower, a drawing that he found somewhere, a piece of dry bread. He sat next to Almeda, took her hand, and talked for hours. Today, the butterflies flew by very early. You know, they dance in your garden. The sunflowers look very sad without their babies there. And me, I also die, my girl, but only inside, because outside I was still walking. Because of you. The doctors try to convince him to give up. It will be better if you accept the truth. I accept everything, except for giving up my niece." At night, he returned to the smelly barn and slept on an old sack. And the next morning he left again. The people of the town began to realize. They did not know his name, but they began to call him Grandfather of Flowers. The afternoon has passed. The last light of the day flows through the window of room 17, dyeing every corner of the wall yellow. But no matter how bright it was, that light was not enough to dissipate the emptiness in the chest of Don Silverio Gutierrez. He sat there, next to Almeda, with his rough hands holding tightly his cold hand, as if trying to give him the remaining heat in this old body. But today something pushed him to leave something behind. A message, a piece of soul, just in case one day he can no longer come here. Silverio carefully ripped out a page in white from the reverse of the old Bible. He took out a worn blue pen from his pocket, thought for a while, and then began to write. "Dear child, you may never read these lines, but if one day you wake up and find it, I want you to know one thing. Remembering where we come from will help us know the way to go. When he was a child, his life was as hard as the stones on the riverbed. Your mother, my great-grandmother, woke up before the sun came out and only slept when the stars were tired and off. One day she cried because a child told her that he was poor, that he would never have anything in life. She knelt down in front of him, dried his tears with an old apron, and said softly, 'Son, the one who has love on his feet will go further than the one who has gold in his pocket.' He never forgot those words. And that is why, Almeda, every step you take to this hospital carries love on your feet. Although they bled, although they trembled, he never stopped. Because of you. I know you are sleeping, my little flower, but I also know that you can still hear me. And I want you to remember that love does not need an answer. Love simply needs to exist. If one day you can no longer come to see me, please forgive me, not because I did not want to, but because God called him to another field. But even there, he will go on for his children. And if you wake up Almeda, please continue to sow love. Water this world with your kindness. And never forget it. The one who has love on his feet will go further than the one who has gold in his pocket. With all my heart." Your grandfather Silverio slowly folded the paper as if he were wrapping a sacred secret. Carefully, he folded it into a small confetti and then placed it under Almeda's pillow near her heart. He made the sign of the cross and whispered, "May you sleep well, little one. May this letter accompany you wherever you go." Then he quietly left the room, with tired steps but with his heart at peace. Today he did not cry. The letter spoke for him. The next morning, Don Silverio came out of the barn with a stick in his hand. He stumbled, his body weaker than ever. A dry cough oppressed his chest, and his breath burned like embers. Many days had passed since he had eaten properly, and each step was now a battle against his own flesh. But even so it was. The sky was cloudy. The air was hot, as if there were going to be a storm. The road was full of sharp stones that stabbed his tired legs. But he did not stop. In his pocket, there were two things: a wooden rosary that belonged to his wife, and a folded paper with a verse from the Bible that Almeda read to him every night. When he arrived at the hospital, the guard stopped him. "Mr. Silverio, you need to rest. You are sick. I cannot." Today I felt that something was about to happen. He refused to take the elevator. Although he was exhausted, he climbed the stairs with difficulty. When he entered room 17, he saw Almeda still lying there, motionless. Everything was disturbingly quiet. Silverio sat down next to the girl, and his trembling hand took hers. He opened the paper he was carrying in his pocket, breathed deeply, and read, "Although I walk in the valley of shadow of death, I will not fear, because Jehovah is with me. His rod and his silence infuse me with breath." His voice drowned. He put his forehead against Almeda's, closed his eyes, and whispered, "There you are, my little soul. You are my rod, and I am your breath." Then, suddenly, he felt a chill, a soft sigh, a movement. He opened his eyes, and then he saw that Almeda's eyes opened slowly. It was as if he had just woken up from a centuries-old dream. She blinked, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "Grandpa!" His voice was weak but alive. Silverio opened his eyes wide. His mouth trembled. Then, as if a volcano exploded, he looked at the sky and shouted, "Sir, thank you." At that moment, a sudden rain fell. But right there, right on the roof of the hospital, right on top of room 17. No clouds. There are no forecasts. Outside, the sky is still dry, but the warm drops of water fall, silently and sacredly. The windows were covered with steam. The ground shone like silver. Almeda sat in bed, her eyes surprised. "Grandpa, is it raining?" Silverio took the girl's hand and smiled, with tears filling her eyes. "No, my daughter, that is not rain. Those are God's tears. God cried with them." And then the old man disappeared among the crowd, like the mist that melts into the sun. They all looked at each other, with their whole bodies covered in tears. They did not understand, but they do not doubt either. In room number 17, Almeda sat down slowly, with her eyes shining. Silverio hugged her tightly, as if he feared her disappearance in the light. Outside, the crowd cried. They cried goodbye. The rain had ceased. The city remained silent, as if the miracles were still resonating in space. Almeda now is asleep, but she is no longer in a coma. She slept like a girl who had just spent a day without worries with the angels. Don Silverio, now sitting in the chair next to him, took the hand of his niece, releasing the pain he had carried throughout his life. In his dream, he entered a vast field, full of crucifixion flowers that flourished brilliantly. In the distance, the corner of an old tree blocked a wooden chair, and there were his loved ones. Mercedes, his wife, still wears her well-known flower dress. Rocio, his daughter, took her mother's hand. "Mercedes," Silverio exclaimed. She smiled, a smile that he had not seen in a long time. "Honey, is this heaven or is it my heart? We never stop living here." Rocio touched his father's face, watching in silence. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter, as you promised. I'm sorry, Father, not having been able to go with you today." Silverio nodded his head. "There is nothing to apologize for. What happened was to show true love." Mercedes pointed to the endless fields. "Look at what I have planted. The flowers of the cross are blooming, like the magical rhythm of the sunlight. But we will meet each time you close your eyes." The wind blew. The flowers dissolved in light, and Silverio woke up suddenly. In front of him, A crucifixion flower bloomed on Almeida's pillow. The petals of the flowers were still wet by the dew, although no one entered the room. He touched her gently, thinking in silence. Now I understand. God. Pain is just a wrinkle, and what I sow is love.